Welcome to No Broken Legs. I am your host, Evan Belfiore. It is the Tuesday following the Super Bowl. We could not record yesterday because of scheduling conflicts, but we are here today, and joining me to talk all things Rams over Bengals is Jimmy Champ. Jimmy, how are you this afternoon?
Oh man, I'm feeling great. My preseason Super Bowl pick made it all the way through, won the big game, so I couldn't be any happier with that. And I loved the halftime show. I loved the second half of the game. We ate some great food. It was a wonderful Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, it was a great get together. You had everybody over at it was at Kelly's parents' house. It was great to get everybody together, watch the game, have some great food, and it was a game that left us with a lot to talk about. And I guess on one level, it felt like that game went pretty much like we had expected it to. The Rams looked good. Cincinnati gave a counterpunch, and then the Rams came from behind there at the end. I don't think we expected that to happen. I felt like the Rams would get ahead and close, but the defensive line really gave Cincinnati a lot of trouble like we expected it would, and that Bengals defense played really well, especially after OBJ got hurt. Jimmy, what is the biggest takeaway you had from this game?
I don't know. There's so many, for me, there are so many key situations in the game. I don't know if it's even close if Odell doesn't leave the game injured with another soft tissue.
It pains me to agree with you there, but their offense looked very, very mediocre after he went out.
It really did. I think my favorite tweet from Super Bowl Sunday was, wow, the Rams offense without OBJ looks like the Browns offense looked with OBJ. And I thought that was, I enjoyed that. That made me chuckle. But I think that was a big part. But, I mean, they were down, obviously no Bobby Trees, no Higbee. Blanton ends up not really playing. So they were pretty much only down to Cooper Cupp. So offensively, I did not expect the Bengals to be able to stop the Rams running game. I thought that was really impressive by the Bengals defense to be able to do that. But I really think, as we talked about, a lot of other people talked about, I think Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase hid a lot of coaching deficiencies that Zach Taylor had this year, and it showed up in the Super Bowl in a lot of key spots. There's no OBJ. Cooper Cupp should have been quadruple covered. There's no way you let Cooper Cupp do that to you, and then on the other side of the ball, to continue to try to go five wide when you couldn't block anybody was just such an indictment on that team, on that organization, on the coaching staff. As much as I wanted the Bengals to lose, as much as I've been beating them up, Joe Burrow did not deserve the beating that I knew he was going to take, that I watched him take. It was kind of hard to watch, but I also enjoyed watching it because, I had all the sack overs for the game. So
yeah, I bet every Rams defensive lineman to get a sack, and all four of them did. And I was kicking myself when the linebacker had a sack there in the second quarter. I was like, shit, I should have bet him too, knowing that the other four would. 7 sacks for 43 yards. Really, man, that just really hurt them a lot. They were able to run the ball.
Yeah.
Joe Mixon, 15 for 72 yards. He had a 4.8 average. But to your point about coaching, why was Joe Mixon not on the field for those 2 big short run plays?
Unless he was injured,
No. He was asked that question apparently after the game, and he was very direct in his response that he was not injured.
There's no good reason to make that horrific decision to decide that Perrine was the way to go on that run. I love Aaron Donald. I don't know if he can tackle Joe Mixon with one arm. I don't know if he...
Well, Perrine was going forward, and Aaron Donald just grabbed him and said, "You're not going forward anymore," and that's what happened. And that was one of the damnedest things I've seen. And I realize Aaron Donald's 280 pounds, 300 pounds or whatever, but I don't think he can just stop Joe Mixon in that same situation. I just don't think he can. But that harkens back to stuff we've seen here in Cleveland before, where we're going, why in the biggest moments of the biggest games are you not putting the ball in the hands of your best players? That's just coaching. That is poor coaching. And like they can't fix that unless they get rid of their head coach after they just improbably went to the Super Bowl, which isn't going to happen. He's going to get a big
Yeah,
extension this year.
yeah. It was so strange. Joe Burrow he's pretty athletic. He's pretty nimble. I don't understand how one of those two plays is not a quarterback sneak or a read option, like something going 5 wide on the last play. I mean, it's inexcusable. And then I do think, Sean McVay, smart of an offensive mind as he is, Sean McVay does tend to be not aggressive on fourth down, but he made sure your both teams convert a fourth down bet hit
Yes.
by a pretty ballsy call. Like, you were at your own 34 minutes left in the game. They might have kicked the field goal on first down if they turned it over right there. Like, that was a hell of a play by Cooper Kupp. And then it just led to all of a sudden the Bengals thinking, sure, Eli Apple can handle Cooper Kupp. Like, it was the damnedest thing. Like, I don't understand the coaching errors that the Bengals made down the stretch of that game. I don't understand it.
So the MVP of the game was voted on, and just for reference, the MVP votes have to be in before the 2-minute warning because this isn't actually a football game. This is actually a television show, and to make the television show work correctly, we have to know who the MVP is like right away after the game. Like, we don't have the technology to tabulate those votes and get it in within, like 5 minutes with modern technology. That's impossible. The votes have to be in early. Cooper Kupp got the MVP. I don't think they got it right, Jimmy. I think it should have been Aaron Donald. He was a force all day. Are you okay with Kupp winning MVP, or do you think it should have been Donald as well?
Well, I'm glad you clarified for our listening family, because a lot of them might not have known that. And I think at the 2-minute warning, Cooper Kupp was the right decision. I really believe
Yeah,
that.
I think I agree with that, but the biggest problem I have is that, the last 2 minutes of the Super Bowl, generally is kind of important.
I agree. I think a whole lot of those people probably would have changed their vote to Aaron Donald. My MVP bet sure would have liked them to change it to Aaron Donald.
Yeah, I guess I should mention that as my bias. I had him at plus 600 to win MVP, but it's not really about that. It's about Cooper Kupp just disappeared for a quarter of this game.
He did, but I think that may be why it happened, because how were they able to make him disappear for the majority of the game? And then in the biggest moments, he showed up and made play after play after play after play. And I think that's why he got the MVP. Like I don't think Cooper Kupp played bad. I think Cooper Kupp was the most deserving offensive player for the award.
I would agree with that.
But I think Aaron Donald deserved the MVP.
Yeah, I just think Donald wreaked havoc all day.
Yeah, I agree.
He was the reason why they ran that trick play for the touchdown, because they were worried that he was just going to blow up whatever they did if they ran something conventional. Like, that's just how it felt.
Much like you predicted on our before the game pod, when the couple of times that they did put an extra offensive lineman in to try to just block Aaron Donald, that's when everybody else ate, specifically Von Miller, A'Shawn Robinson, everyone else on the line was able to get free the second they tried to double team and triple team Aaron Donald, which that's the difference from their first Super Bowl. Because when the Patriots said, we're going to take Aaron Donald away, they didn't have the personnel, the game plan, and the scheme to make it happen. This time they did. They did a great job of it. We talked about it. If you're going to do that to Aaron Donald, Von Miller's going to eat. A'Shawn Robinson's going to eat. Reader's going to get free. And that's exactly what happened.
We also saw Matt Stafford really, really ascend. People, man, the Hall of Fame debate with him is kind of ridiculous at this point. Like, he doesn't even have a winning record as a starting quarterback. But people just need to calm down with this in the moment stuff. But he mostly played well. He had 3 touchdowns, hit the 2.5 over. He had 2 interceptions. The first one was a really bad pass that he just tried to throw without setting his feet and getting fully behind it. That's probably a touchdown if he does. Then he had one that was off his receiver's hands. How do you feel about Stafford's performance?
I'm okay with it. I'm not surprised by it. I feel like Robert Mays and Tice from The Athletic they've summed up Matt Stafford's time in the Rams perfectly. He just appears to always be looking to make the coolest throw possible as opposed to probably the better football decision. Like, there was no reason to try to throw that ball into the end zone. If he throws it 5 yards deeper, though, it's probably a touchdown. But I can live with both interceptions if you're going to be able to make that no-look dime to Cooper Cupp to win the game, basically. Like, that throw was incredible. I think Matt Stafford did enough. Like, the interception off of Skoranic's hands, he can't do anything about that. But it was a poor throw on the first interception. But, I mean, that's kind of been Matt Stafford's up and down this year. He hasn't had a lot of no-interception games. He tends to throw balls he shouldn't throw. But unfortunately for him now, it's not like Detroit. He's got a team around him to help bail him out a little bit. But that last drive, he made every throw he needed to make, put the ball in the right spot. You know, the throw at the back of the end zone where Cupp got his bell rung might have been the best throw he made all day. So, you know, I just think it was I think he did absolutely what he needed to do, and I agree with you. His numbers are going to say he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, but you can't get into the Hall of Fame with a losing record as a starting quarterback. That just can't be that can't be allowed. Like, it just can't be.
Well, his numbers look inflated when you look at historical guys because he's right in the sweet spot for when you look at guys that came before him. They played under a very different set of rules, and like offensive numbers just look better, and we need to look at that as a demarcation line, I think, and not look at his numbers much like Phil Rivers. Yeah, he looks great when you compare him to the quarterbacks of the 80s, but when you compare him to his contemporaries, they were never really even a top 5 guy.
Well, because my thing is always, you know, the thing I always say about the NBA Hall of Fame, because I feel like the NBA Hall of Fame, I feel like they elect too many players.
Well, they do.
I don't think
they're the Basketball Hall of Fame. The NBA doesn't actually have their own Hall of Fame.
True.
That's why college career gets involved in all that. So,
True. But I just feel like to go into the Hall of Fame, you should have to be at least top 3 or top 5 at your position for the majority of the time you played. And Matt Stafford has hardly ever been that. But I still just love that he embraced his role on this team. You know, they said 1v1, we are a quarterback away from winning a Super Bowl. Matt Stafford is the guy that can get us there. McVay knew he could work with Stafford, and when Stafford had to make the plays in the playoffs, he did. It's kind of incredible. I'm sure there's other quarterbacks to do it. To me, it's incredible, though, that Matt Stafford's first 4 postseason victories were all in this postseason leading to a Super Bowl. I think that's kind of incredible. And I think he did exactly what he needed to do in this game. You know, I'm still shocked, though. I am still shocked that the Bengals won the turnover battle, shut down Cam Akers, and still found a way to lose the game because their offense just isn't – it's just not schematically good enough.
No, they don't seem to take advantage of everything that they have very well, and it all starts with that offensive line. They just Joe Burrow didn't play poorly in this Super Bowl. He was 22 of 33, 263. He did throw a touchdown. He avoided interceptions, and really he hung in there about as good as you can expect him to. The only play that looked like he kind of threw up for grabs was that 4th down, and you have to throw that up for grabs. There isn't any other option there. So I think he played
absolutely.
pretty well. They just got to fix that offensive line. They got to keep him upright because he looked like he got hurt again with that. He got hurt with his knee. Looked like his right knee got twisted.
Can we talk about that just for a minute?
Yeah.
So for all you out there in Who Day Nation, certain you've started a franchise and this is a little mini dynasty run you're going to go on, I would pump the brakes on that because you have one of the cheapest owners in the history of professional sports, and fixing an offensive line, it's not that easy. It's just not. Like you've got to get lucky in the draft or overspend for a guy who doesn't score touchdowns or make plays on the defensive side of the ball, which is traditionally what cheap owners don't do. So I'm very curious to see exactly how the Bengals go about fixing their offensive line problems. Like, people are talking about it like, hey, if the Bengals just get 2 tackles and a guard, they'll go back to the Super Bowl next year like it's a done deal. I think it's a lot more complicated than that.
Well, they have cap issues, and they're going to have to try to keep some of the guys they have on defense too. They're not going to be able to. I don't think they're going to be able to bring everybody back, and that's kind of the situation the Rams are facing. It'll be interesting to see what that team looks like next year. This will kind of lead into what we want to talk about for all of you out there in terms of gambling trends that we saw this year. The lead into that is, Jimmy, this game, I don't want to necessarily say the officiating was terrible. I just think that the officiating was incredibly inconsistent. And they just missed a couple of just like the face mask on the Higgins touchdown, and when the entire Rams offensive line was offsides. Like, not throwing flags on those those are just egregiously bad missed calls.
But it was the back. It was the back to back of it where you don't call the face mask that led to a touchdown. I don't understand how there is not somebody in a booth somewhere that during the Super Bowl can't whistle down and go, dude, we can't miss this in this game. We have to throw this flag. But you miss that, right? And then Stafford comes back, throws the interception. The Bengals get the ball back. That was where then Aaron Donald shoves Joe Burrow out of bounds, and 4 members of the offensive line try to pick a fight with Aaron Donald. No flag thrown there, like you said. And then when the Rams are going in to score, everybody but the center moved a half tick early. No flag thrown. But then you throw, and while they were all penalties, you throw like back to back holding or defensive pass interference flags when you've been letting the defense play that way all game.
Yeah,
like,
that was what I had the biggest problem with, because it felt like they were playing under different sets of rules the first, 58 minutes, and then that last drive they were actually calling stuff. But that's what it's been like all playoffs. They've really been letting these guys play. And I said it was a lead in to our gambling trends. I think this is the first gambling trend that we have to consider is probably more of a lock moving forward than we had thought. These games are closer than we had anticipated. We didn't have a lot of covers. And I think the defense is being allowed to play, being allowed to grab, that cuts down on the offense. And that is something that I don't think that's going away, because I think the NFL wants the referees to swallow their whistles on these plays because they don't want a bunch of calls slowing down the action.
I think really the only games where teams covered was that first weekend where you had 2 teams, one team in each conference that shouldn't be in the playoffs anyway, getting their doors blown off. I think those were the only ones where the covers actually happened, I believe.
Yeah, and we had a lot of upsets. We saw both 1 seeds fall. Kansas City lost. We did not expect them to lose to Cincinnati. Tampa Bay lost. They were considered favorites, if not for Green Bay. I think all of it is all of the changes that have happened in the NFL. Now you have an extra team that's going to the playoffs, which means they're playing an extra game. Everybody's already playing an extra game. So it looks like these things are really building up, which mean we discussed it a little bit, how it seems like the season is now broken up into 3 parts before we get to the playoffs. Yep. And you were able to take advantage of this because the Rams' Super Bowl odds kept fluctuating. And we saw this last year with Tampa Bay. So why don't you tell our audience what you saw following that every week?
So in the preseason, the Rams and the Chiefs were my 2, those were the teams I picked to go to the Super Bowl. So I bet both of them on their preseason odds. The Rams' preseason odds were plus 1,400. By week 4, that number was already down to 850. By week 8, it was down to 650. But then week 14, it was back up to 1,300. Like, that is a huge fluctuation in 13 weeks. For a team whose roster got better as the season went along, right? Like, you lost Robert Woods, but you were able to add Von Miller and Odell, which we felt like Odell would be a great fit with Cooper Kupp because he didn't have to be a number 1. And for them to drop that low and then pop back up, we talked about it multiple times. We thought the Rams, at that point of the year, the Rams, if you hadn't made a bet for a team to win the Super Bowl, the Rams were a great value bet right there. And I think that's going to be something to look at, is going to be teams that have good odds to start the season, then struggle at the end of that first part, start of the second part, and then start to get hot at the end of the third part, where you're going to want, if it's a team you trust, you're probably going to want to start locking in those bets there a little before like the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks of the season.
Yeah, because we saw that with Tampa Bay the previous season, where they didn't look right in the the early middle-ish part of the season, but then they gelled together and they really made a run there. And I think Tampa Bay and Cincinnati share a lot of characteristics, and there were just some weird shit happened. Like Cincinnati had personal foul calls against Kansas City. That didn't get called, just like they did against the Rams. Tannehill throwing 3 interceptions isn't mind-blowing, but that they were throwing so much with Tannehill is sort of a weird thing. And Mahomes just collapses. And Derek Carr really, I feel like he gave up that game in the fourth quarter when you spike the ball and then you don't even get the ball out on fourth down. You don't even give your guys a chance. So
even before that, in the Raiders game, you had that whistle while the ball was in the air.
Oh yeah. And then you look at T. Higgins. That play was indicative of what what Cincinnati has kind of gotten on this run. There's like these 3 to 5 plays a game that just sort of go their way, that keep them in it, and then they were able to win them close, but they weren't able to win this one. It just seems like there's more randomness in how these seasons and games are playing out, because that is what we would expect to happen. With more games, you're going to have more injuries, more guys are in and out of the lineup, and it wears guys down.
I think you'll probably, especially with the added game and the only one team getting a bye, if that stands, I think every year you're going to see a team like the Cardinals that start off super hot and then fade like that at the end of the year.
Well, it'll probably be the Cardinals again next year.
Ooh.
So the Cincinnati Bengals are in the Cleveland Browns division. The Browns blew their doors off about halfway through the season, and then the last game of the season, the Browns beat the Browns 1.5 backups starters took on the Bengals backups, and they beat them. Where do you think Cincinnati falls in? Where do you expect Cincinnati to finish in the division next year?
Well, and I think either the following week or the week after the Browns beat the Bengals by 4 scores, they also lost to the Jets. So, let's stop with how great the Bengals were this year. Let's stop with that shit. I think the Bengals are really going to struggle next year. If I can make a bet on a team that made the playoffs this year and will miss it next year, my bet will be on the Bengals, because I think the Ravens will be fine. I think, as much as I hate it, the Steelers are in a rebuild, but they're still gonna battle, and I think the Browns are gonna be better than they were last year. But the Bengals' out of conference schedule is really tough. When I look at it, now who the hell knows what Miami's gonna look like next year? But then you've got the NFC South. The Saints and the Bucks can still be good. And then you've got the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Cowboys. All 3 of those teams have a pass rush, and at least 2 of them have good cornerbacks that can kind of duplicate what the Rams were able to do. So the Bengals aren't going to sneak up on anybody. It's going to be just like the Browns were this year. They're going to get everybody's full attention, everybody's best shot, everybody's best game plan, and their out-of-conference schedule is going to be really hard. I think the Bengals are going to have a down year next year. They may come back the following year. I think next year is going to be a rough year for Joe Burrow. I think he's going to see a ton of just 0 blitzes, full boxes. Hey, if you can get the ball to Jamar Chase before we can get you, go for it. I think that's what defenses are going to challenge him with next year.
When we've gone through the playoffs, we've always asked, could the Browns win a game like this? Do they have the roster construction to win a game like this? And we would think that the offensive line would hold up better. Maybe not this year with the tackles, Conklin being out and Will's playing on basically one ankle. But when that line is healthy, we would expect the Browns to match up a lot better against that defensive line. Do you think the Browns would have matched up okay against the Rams if they were fully healthy, given that Cincinnati was able to run the ball?
Yes, I do. And I also think as much of a beatdown as he took later in the season, I think Joe Woods' game plan would have been better defensively than the Bengals' game plan. I think they would have probably actually let you run the ball and not given you the passing lanes that you had. But I think offensively, I think the Browns would have been able to sustain drives, move the ball, and I think they would have been able to score a little bit more points because their offensive line is just better. And, I mean, the holes that Mixon was running through, you put Chubb through those holes, one of those is probably a 30 or 40 breakaway run.
Yeah, they're not nearly as dynamic offensively as either of these teams. They don't have the weapons. But that is where we've routinely said if they can upgrade the receiving core in the offseason, that's about all they have to do if they can bring back the tight ends. They can add two guys that would really change the complexion of what the offense looks like.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess that Kansas City Buffalo game was really something that freaked me out watching because I don't think the Browns had what it takes to win a game like that. I still question whether Myles Garrett can reach that next level like Aaron Donald did in this game where he just took over. We don't see him do that a lot, but we also know that he doesn't have the talent on the defensive line that this Rams team has. And that's another place I'd like to see the Browns upgrade because I think they have the secondary. They've got a lot of good cover guys.
Yeah. Yep.
And the running back's good. The offensive line is good. You get another pass rusher in there and you shore up the interior of the defensive line. And I think they're in good shape, even with the linebacking core not being as strong as a lot of people would like it to be. I know that's something that you're constantly talking about.
Yeah, I think those are the spots that you have to upgrade because like that was kind of, Brown's social media was all over, we need to see Myles Garrett. We need to see Myles Garrett be more like Aaron Donald. That's a big ask. Like, Myles Garrett is really good. Aaron Donald might be top 3 at his position all time. Like, so that's a big
people
ask.
Are starting to talk about him in the same breath as Reggie White and Lawrence Taylor, which is
exactly.
That's elite company.
Yeah, so, but I agree. But, there were games. Like, Myles Garrett changed the complexion of the Bears game. The Ravens game, even though Hundley tried to get the comeback, he had the key play in that game to get the win.
Yep.
So we have at times seen Myles Garrett take over games for a spot. But I agree with you. Myles Garrett definitely appears to take some plays off. That's just what it appears to be. So we need him to work on that motor a little bit and get back in it. But I think the thing with what the Rams have on defense is what you talk about. They've got depth. And the Browns just have to build. They've got to get a little better and a little more depth on the front end of the defense. And then you've just got to improve the pass catchers to a point where DPJ is the clear 2. Teach Schwartz how to run some routes. And you've got these really good tight ends. And then I think the offense is pretty much set if the offensive line is healthy.
Yeah, and that's
I agree.
If the offensive line is injured and Baker's getting pressured a lot, there isn't going to be it. I've said before, it doesn't matter who your quarterback is. If you can't block, you're going to have a lot of trouble winning consistently. I mean, Cincinnati's the first team in a long time that we can think of that gave up sacks at a rate like this and still was able to win playoff games.
Exactly. But, I don't think you were wrong with being freaked out by that Bills-Chiefs game. Because the Bills were statistically the number 1 defense in the world on all fronts, and the Chiefs made them look like a high school defense for most of the game. But I think the Chargers are probably one of the only other offenses that could have really gone toe-to-toe in that game consistently like that. So I agree with you. I don't think the Browns have a structure or an identity to compete in a game like that. Most of the rest of the playoff games on both sides, AFC and NFC, I think the Cleveland Browns are built to win those kind of games.
A concern that I started to have over the course of the season was Kevin Stefanski's offensive philosophy doesn't really utilize wide receivers to what I think a lot of us would think is their full potential. Do you think the Browns can be successful in the playoffs with their run-oriented philosophy? Or do you think Stefanski's going to need to open things up and get the wide receivers more involved?
I think if he's got a healthy Baker Mayfield and healthy playmakers, I think it will gradually open up the offense without changing anything. I think you can run that zone stretch to Nick Chubb 3 or 4 times in a row, and then run the naked boot behind it and hit something big across the field. But it all stems from timing, health, and productivity on first down. I think that's the thing Kevin Stefanski has to focus on the most this offseason, is figuring out how to get yards on first down again, because that was the problem the team had.
I have a suggestion.
What's that?
Hey, just give the ball to Nick Chubb.
Well, he didn't seem to like that answer this year, bud.
Well, I didn't like what his offense looked like this year either. So if he's going to come out and do the same thing, and I'm going to see empty sets on first down, I'm going to tear my hair out next year too.
But I have a question for you that, all Browns fans talk about. Like, if they're able to draft one of these top wide receivers with their first round pick and then sign somebody like an Allen Robinson, or there are some very good wide receiver free agents going to be available, does that change your opinion of what the offense should be? Like, if they get some legitimate playmakers, do you then still hate them going 5 wide to start a game?
Yes. Because even if you draft a wide receiver and bring another one in, at your core, you are built to run the football. That is your identity. You want to run the football, you want to pound it down the other team's throat, you want to play good defense, and you want to really just take their will away. And if you're going to play like that, you have to come out playing like that. And going empty set on first down isn't that philosophy. And I wonder how much of their troubles offensively this year were based on the idea that everybody talked about how they were a running team, but when you watched them play, they didn't seem to have the courage of their convictions to keep running the ball in early down situations, or to stick with it if it wasn't working necessarily like they were wanting it to. I felt like they panicked too quickly to get away from the run. And even if you had some wide receivers, maybe that gives you a little more leeway so that when you're throwing the ball more, it doesn't look as bad. But they're built to run the football. That's their identity. That's what they should be doing.
There's so much deception they can do with any of their running backs in the backfield. And, that's what we want to see. We talked about it when the Rams were having trouble moving the ball there on that key third down. They ran that beautiful wheel route to Darrell Henderson, and we're just like, we got 3 running backs that can make that play. Why don't we run that play? I agree with you. I think the identity needs to still stem from running the ball. But the thing, I still believe what I talked about. I think, we still forget, because he seems so cool and collected, we forget Kevin Stefanski has only been an actual head coach for 2 years. Who knows what the play calling duties are going to fall into next year. But I still feel like it was him trying to be too smart. And hopefully he'll watch tape, see the plays that actually worked, and go, shit, I don't have to try to play chess when they're playing checkers. I just gotta take the jumps that are there, right? Find the weak spot on the other team's defense and run Nick Chubb right there, right? That's it. That's the game plan to start the game. And then you can quickly start to run the naked boots, get Baker on the move, get the tight ends coming across the field with DPJ and Schwartz behind them, and you can really hurt some defenses. And I think that will be the game plan going forward. I really do. I think Stefanski just got in over his head a little bit this year. Joe Woods struggled a little bit defensively to start the year, which is kind of when the offense was actually its best, was when the defense was playing the worst, so we took a couple losses there. So I think it'll all come together next year, and I think they'll have a nice bounce-back season from this year that was about a push on whether or not it was a failure or not.
I feel like it was just a season from hell. Everybody kept getting hurt. You had all the OBJ drama. But it does feel like the circus has finally left town. And with Jarvis Landry's probably not going to be back, and not that Jarvis Landry was a bad citizen in any of this, but I think getting the more veteran players that had been other places and came to Cleveland when they were a mess, like I think it's good to sort of move on from those guys and just sort of leave the 1-31 seasons behind. Myles Garrett was still super young, so he doesn't really have to carry that, especially with how well he played. And most of the rest of the guys weren't even here. So it feels like they're leaving the circus and the stink of all of that behind. Like it's finally over, and they can try and make a start moving forward. Hopefully Baker's good enough that they can hold on to him and we can have a quarterback for at least a couple more years.
Yeah, I think everything we hit on, I will continue to send the tape of this episode to the Cleveland Browns offices in Berea. Everybody listen to it, take our advice, do this, and we will be successful this year.
Yeah, and to your point about Kevin Stefanski and the play calling, I wonder if they just got too much. You know how like if you go to a diner, you can get good food and you can get anything at a diner. But diners don't make anything spectacularly well. Like he needs to be less of a diner where he's calling all the plays on the sheet.
Yeah, I agree.
And he needs to find a core group of plays that work and really run those plays repeatedly, because that tight end play that they do with Harrison Bryant is 20 yards every time they run it. And they only run it once a week. Like it doesn't seem like they go back to it. Same thing with some of their running plays. It just seems like they come up with these interesting concepts, or they come up with a concept that works, and once it works once, they just get away from it. That doesn't make sense to me. I would also really like to see Chubb and Hunt in the backfield together.
Yes, that's where it's at.
That is, if we don't see that next year, that's another thing that's gonna make me lose some faith in Stefanski if he can't figure that out.
Yeah, and I think like it's something we've talked about. We beat them up because it happened multiple times this year. They've got to find I think this stems off of what you're saying. They do have to find a couple plays, whatever they are, that they can run out of the same formation to guarantee them the Leroy Horde.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
because that should be doable with that line and with Chubb and Hunt.
Right. When we have a key 3rd and 1 that we have to get a first down, we need to be able to line up in one formation that we can run 2 or 3 plays out of, that the defense doesn't necessarily know what's coming, and whichever play we call will work for 3 yards. Because that's why we lost the Raiders game. It was a problem in the games earlier in the season. You have to be able to get that first down. But there's so many times where they line up to run a play where everybody's sitting at the couch and everybody on the other sideline knows exactly what's coming, and you can tell it by the way it gets defended.
Another positive sign for the Browns is records in close games tends to be something that fluctuates from year to year.
Yep.
The Bengals were really good at that this year, especially in the playoffs. And that goes back to something I mentioned earlier, where it just seemed like there was this mysticism that sort of fell over the stadium when they were playing in some of these games, sort of like the what was it? Was it the Tom Brady Tampa game where the 40-yard field goal came up like 5 yards short?
Yeah.
It was just exactly. Like, what? Like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So the Browns had some stuff like that last year, and they didn't have it this year. And even if they just get some of it back, they don't have to get all of it back. But they didn't seem to get any of it this year. So even if they just regress to the mean, everybody that hates analytics is hating me right now. If they just regress to the mean in some of the things that we would consider luck-based, I think they're easily going to make the playoffs. I think they're going to compete for the division as long as they stay healthy. Which is a big thing after this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's 2 words that shouldn't go together, but we watch enough football and we play enough fantasy football to know that the phrase positive regression is real. It's weird. I know it shouldn't be, but it is. And the Browns should be on the plus side of the positive regression this year.
Yeah, and we also have to remember we get very prisoner of the moment in these things, and here we are. People are wondering if Joe Burrow's going to be, how many Super Bowls is Joe Burrow going to be in? How many more Super Bowls will Matt Stafford be in? Now, Dan Marino only went to 1.
Yep.
And Aaron Rodgers has been to 2? He's only won 1.
Yeah, he's only been to 2.
Yeah, he's only been to 2. We would think that number would be higher. Phillip Rivers never made a Super Bowl.
Yep.
So,
and, I think right now, unfortunately for Joe Burrow, the fairest, most equal comparison to what he's going through right now is Andrew Luck. You're on a team that has an owner and a GM and a coach that none of them are sure about each other, or it doesn't seem like they have a clear vision for what needs to be done. And, that to me right now seems to be the fairest comparison because, man, you can't let your franchise quarterback get beat up the way he did. When I saw you in this game run multiple plays where you put 6 offensive linemen on the field and your quarterback still got hit.
Yeah, that's you just can't. You're not going to have sustained success if that's happening.
So, like I said, and I agree with you. Joe Burrow did about as well as he could do in the situation. But, if you take that touchdown off the board that shouldn't have been a touchdown, this was probably more closer to the game everyone was expecting.
I totally agree with that. And the OBJ injury. Van Jefferson had 4 catches for 23 yards, which kind of surprised me because he played like his mind was elsewhere, and it had good reason for that because his wife went into labor during the game.
Yeah, exactly.
That he felt like he couldn't get open there for a little bit. I would have liked to have seen them give him like an end around or an easy screen or something. Just give him an easy play to make to try and get his mind back into the game. Like, okay, everything's fine now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are your final thoughts here? The season's over. The Rams are victorious. You get to take a victory lap on that. The Bengals completely surprised us. Do you think more teams are going to approach their draft picks like the Rams have?
No, I don't, because the Rams had to hit on a lot of draft picks to get to the point where they could do what they were able to do. Like, if that makes sense. Like,
that makes sense.
Along with like what they've done in free agency these last 2 years of trading away draft picks to bring in these big time key free agents, they had to get right on a whole lot of draft picks to build the team that they have. And I don't think a lot of teams are able to do that, but I do think you'll see more teams that feel like, man, I'm a player away or 2 players away. Can I look at that guy? Can I really draft somebody in the first round as good as that guy? Let's see what it takes to get that guy. I do think you will see more of that. I really do. It makes sense. I don't know if there are a lot of teams that are actually in the situation the Rams were in, because the Rams thought all they needed was a quarterback, and then they also went out and got Von Miller and OBJ just to be safe. Like, I don't know how many teams are really in that situation, but like I said, I enjoyed watching it work, and we talked about it. We loved how you had these 2 teams, one that was, at least offensively, the Rams have been built completely through the draft, or the Bengals have been built completely through the draft. Now, on the defense, they focused on free agents, but offensively, they've been completely through the draft. And then you have the Rams who have done it a little bit differently. But this year was just, like you said, there was some weird and wild stuff that happened this year. I think in the middle of the season, you probably saw some of the biggest spreads that have ever been given in NFL football games, where you had a couple teams that were just horrible and a couple teams that were scoring a ton of points. So that was fun to deal with. And then, man, I wish Derrick Henry wouldn't have had that foot injury, because who the hell knows how many offensive yards he would have had. Cooper Cupp having one of the best wide receiver seasons ever. Hopefully the Colts can figure something out and let Jonathan Taylor really be able to work. This league is just full of young, great superstars. And it's going to be fun to see where the landscape changes over the next few years, because it really doesn't feel like it's in Foxborough and Lambeau right now.
The AFC is just loaded with young quarterbacks.
Yes, sir.
And any small fluctuations that these guys have up or down is going to make a big difference in where these teams end up. And I think that's going to lead to a lot of chaos. I think it's going to lead to a lot more variance in the outcomes that we see. And that's something that we'll have to be cognizant of as bettors, because a lot of those bigger lines didn't hit, but then a lot of them also did hit. So trying to parse which teams are for real, because Buffalo looked like they could beat anybody on any given week, and then they go and lay an egg against Jacksonville. That was just very bizarre. I guess one last point. OBJ suffered a non-contact injury in this game. He's probably got a torn ACL. That would be my guess. Do you think he plays next year? Do you think he ever plays again?
I really don't know, because I've heard a lot of people saying, well, if Cam Akers can come back from that injury as fast as he did, OBJ can come too. Man, I don't know if OBJ's got that kind of work ethic. I'm not trying to shit on the guy, but I guess now we'll find out how much OBJ loves football, right? Like, do you want to play next year? Do you want to still continue your career, or are you good with the way it ended? Like, it wouldn't surprise me if OBJ never played again, because I don't know if he's got that mindset to rehab for 12, 13, 14 hours a day like Cam Akers was doing to get back in the time frame he got back in. Because, he's not under contract, so somebody's going to need you. What is the market going to be for him? It'll be curious to see.
Well, if the market is anything like we've seen the last couple of years, if all he does is rehab off contract and throw some videos out there, some people are going to give him workouts halfway through the season when he's able to come back. I mean, everybody, any contender will be looking to add a player they think can help them, and I think he's shown he can help. If you have a star wide receiver and you put OBJ next to him, he can do a lot of things as a wide receiver too.
Yeah.
I worry about the fact that this is now his second non-contact injury in how many years?
3.
I don't know if he's going to physically be able to play. I think he wants to play, and I think he'll be in his element rehabbing because he can do all his rehabbing stuff. He can do his Twitter and Instagram posts and do all his workout videos, and that's OBJ in his element. I mean, he loves doing that stuff. I mean, he's done it a lot lately because he can't stay healthy, which, I'm not trying to bash him, but he's an eclectic guy. He's sort of a weird dude. So I think he's more comfortable doing that than actually playing in the season, if that makes any sense. But I think he'll try and come back for next year. I really do. I'm curious to see what the market's going to be out there for him, and I'm really curious to see if the Rams sign him to something really low just to give him an opportunity to rehab and come back later next season. Do you think that ends up being something that happens?
The Rams seem to be pretty loyal to guys that help them win, so that would not surprise me at all.
Yeah, maybe like a 2-year deal with a bunch of escalators for performance. I could see something like that. It's a bummer for OBJ. He was what, a half and a quarter away from. I think if he would have continued the game like we expected him to, he probably was going to get a 2 or 3 year deal.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And then, I mean, in that offense, to be fair, healthy OBJ, healthy Robert Woods, healthy Tyler Higbee, that offense might have been damn near unstoppable at the start of the season.
Yeah, that's just a gross amount of talent for a team like that to have.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably a good place to wrap up. The NFL season's over. We will be coming back to you with movement on the Browns. That'll probably be a couple weeks away because nothing really starts until mid-March, free agency. Then we'll be getting ready for the draft. We'll be doing a basketball podcast here before long to just let some of these massive deals that came through, just let the smoke clear. We still haven't seen Ben Simmons play. Harden still, we have to see what he looks like at the Sixers, and then there were a lot of other moves. Luckily, the Karis LeVert deal looks like it's already paid some dividends for the Cavs, so we'll be getting into all of that later. But Jimmy, thanks for recapping the Super Bowl with me. You were right from the beginning. You had the Rams before we started, and here we are at season's end, and it was the Rams. Congratulations, my man.
Thank you very much. We put a lot of time, effort, and work into really looking at the schedule and seeing who we thought was going to come out on top. And clearly the work paid off. And, man, it was a great football season. And like you said, can't wait to get into the off season and get into the Cavs, man.
All right, and I'd like to thank all of you for listening, along with all of our newer subscribers. We appreciate that. For Jimmy Champ, I am Evan Belfiore, and we are No Broken Legs.